What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome to Not Your Status Quo's retrospective of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Tonight, we're going to be going over Episode 3 and Episode 12.
And if you like what you see, please subscribe to our channel and smash that like button.
Don't forget to share it with all of your friends, and then challenge that bell to an Agni Kai.
Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
All right, we're diving back into Avatar: The Last Airbender. Last review, we took a look at episodes 1 and 2, which kind of went together as one complete story. This time, we're going to take a look at episodes 3 and episode 12. So what we're going to do is we're taking two episodes that have a lot of similarities and sort of compare and contrast Aang and Zuko. All right, so we kind of start with episode 3. Aang is super excited to show his new friends, Katara and Sokka, one of the air temples that he spent a lot of time in, and the home of basically like his father figure, Monk Gyatso. So he's mentioned this character previously, and he seems really excited. He knows that there's probably a good chance that Monk Gyatso might not still be around, but he's pretty sure that other airbenders will still be around. And this is where we get into the totally, completely for kids genocide episode. So they're heading over to the air temple, and so it's already looking kind of dark, kind of desolate. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of life around. Every now and again, it'll flash back, and Aang will remember something from the past, and they'll be showing when he was playing a game, or when he was investigating something with the air temple, or Monk Gyatso, making cakes with them and everything, and it looks so bright and happy. But then when it comes back to present day, it looks like nobody has been around for a long time. Things look very unkempt, and the entire time Katara wants to let Aang know. She wants to warn him and basically hey, don't get too excited, hoping to see somebody, because there's a good chance that they're all dead. For kids.
Yeah, it's always a positive thing to throw in death with a children's story. But this is not a children's story. It's just toned down for the children.
It definitely isn't a children's story, but it's so nice that they have Aang being a 12-year-old, how he should be. Sure, he's 112 years old or whatever. But, he was frozen in ice, and, him being so excited to go there and thinking he's almost always positive. And I know, obviously, with what happens in this episode, that's going to be changing a little bit. But it's just good to see this character. He's like, oh, my God, I remember we did all this fun stuff, and I can't wait to get there. And, Katara and Sokka are kind of like, should we tell him, or should we let him find out? And they probably should have prepared him a little better, because we know what happens later on in the episode.
What I like about this in the beginning part is that, they show Aang, and he's just got this childlike excitement to go to the temple. And then they go back and forth between him and Zuko. We learn a little bit, as Doug just mentioned, about Zuko's backstory. And he's been, at sea for 2 years after being banished by his father. And you mentioned that, when he gets there, he's a little upset. Aang, that is, when he gets to the Southern Temple, about how everything has changed. But Sokka, being a good friend and brother type, quickly makes him feel better by going ahead and playing airball with him. And some of the things that Monk Gyatso said, you can apply not to just Airbender, but it's good things to learn in life. When he did the pie thing. And landed it on all the other monks' heads. It was hilarious. And what he said right before that was, we can't concern ourselves with what was. We must act on what is. That's good life advice, And another lesson before they sent it, and this will be my final point of the moment, is that when you are ready, things will fall into place. When you're ready, the Avatar will find what he needs to guide him to become the Avatar.
See, that gave me some serious Star Wars vibes. That's what I was kind of feeling from those kind of scenes. And I know we mentioned this the last episode that the air nomads, they sort of have like an almost similar Jedi-like philosophy where they don't have attachments. They don't really have families like the way that we would see them. And the whole idea is they're very, just kind of go with the wind, no pun intended. But that's just like kind of how they are. And it reminds me a lot of the philosophy, like what you just spoke about, Dave, is very similar to like what you might hear a Jedi say.
Yeah.
And we know that phrase, the "you can't change the past, you can only look forward," comes up in episode 12, the storm that we'll be talking about this episode also.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that we see, so Dave mentioned that David mentioned that this kind of goes back and forth between Aang and Zuko. And again, that's really important as to why we chose to take a look at these two episodes, is because both of them kind of do that. Now, on one hand, you've got Zuko, who now is going to face one of our other recurring villains that we're going to see in this season, one of the Fire Nation captains. So he's basically... facing him, he's being questioned and interrogated. And, this captain is basically looking at him like, well, you're just a disgraced prince. You're nothing. And, he's like, so how did all this damage happen to your ship? And, so Zuko is very one-track mind. He's got to catch the Avatar. That's the only thing that he wants to do. Dave had mentioned this, that he's been on the sea for 2 years trying to do this. And we end up finding out why, between these two episodes that we're talking about, that he's very honor-focused. He was banished from his homeland by his father with a goal of finding the Avatar as his only means to return. So that is his one goal. And he kind of, and every now and again, he'll take it out on his crew members. He does that in episode 3. When he's kind of, yelling at them a bit, and when he's yelling at his own uncle, telling him, like, I don't need to do this and I don't need to do that. And he does it again in episode 12. We'll see that. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah, he's very focused on this. And it turns out that Zhao, he ends up already, he thought ahead of the time, and he interrogated everybody that was on Zuko's ship, which I don't know if that means that he's really good at getting information when he needs it, or if the men on Zuko's ship just aren't very loyal.
And it could be the latter because, Zuko does not treat his fellow shipmates very well. And we see in episode 12 where the uncle kind of explains why he is that way. And I think, the uncle is such an amazing leader. If the Fire Nation had him as the Fire Lord and not I think, well, the show wouldn't have been as interesting, of course. But, the Fire Nation wouldn't be as fascist. He's such a level-headed. He's so good with people, and he, has a good understanding of why everyone acts a certain way. And he's good at explaining it to other people.
At the end, where Zuko has to duel with Zhao, but he holds back at the end of the duel from killing him because I'm assuming because it's like he has mercy in his heart, but mercy is seen as a weakness in the firebenders. So when Zuko doesn't kill him, Zhao attacks Zuko as he's walking away, and Iroh gets up and he gets in his face about it and says, "My son in exile has more honor than you." And and by the way, thanks for the tea. That's why I like Iroh. He keeps it light,
Well, and after that too, remember Zuko, because he's like, my nephew has more honor than blah blah, and he goes, "Did you mean it?" And he goes, "Oh yes, I love the jasmine tea."
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to find out, if you guys aren't already aware, that's sometimes I think our Iroh, he sort of juggles between whether he likes tea more than his own nephew. But yeah, he's really likes his tea to the point where he'll risk his life for it.
He's earned it.
But yeah, you bring up a great point, Dave. Yeah, so Zuko is a very honorable individual, and we'll find out also in episode 12 that maybe one of the reasons why he doesn't just, go off and kill, Captain Zhao, is probably because he doesn't see a point in killing anybody from the Fire Nation, even if they might deserve it. So the main reason why he ended up having to eventually duel his father, as we'll talk about in episode 12, is because he was against the idea of leading, a bunch of Fire Nation soldiers to their slaughter. So it's definitely, it's definitely something that he wouldn't do. It's definitely in him to not want to needlessly kill.
Especially, I mean, he's okay killing anyone else, but Fire Nation, he sees if we kill our own people, it's only going to weaken us. And he understands that any loss of a Fire Nation life is going to be basically worse for his nation as a whole. And I think, that's what drives him, and him wanting to get back in good graces with his father and the Fire Nation, obviously drives all of his actions, but he does it with such an honor, his own sort of based honor, where, he's not going to kill him because he may need him later.
Absolutely. So back to the air temple with Aang and company. Aang ends up discovering what could be food for Sokka, but eventually becomes their pet. And this is where we get introduced to Momo, another animal friend. And so Sokka is just like Zuko's one-track mind is all about restoring his honor. Sokka, you're going to find, is all about getting his next meal. And he's pretty hungry, so he's ready to eat Momo. But they end up finding a chamber within the air temple, which Aang has to open up with airbending. And he ends up finding all of these statues, which we find out are previous avatars. And Aang happens to know who one of the avatars is without seeing like a plaque or anything. He goes, "Oh, that's Avatar Roku." And Katara says, "Well, how did you know who that was? There wasn't anything written down." And Aang goes, "I don't know. I just knew." And again, so we talked a little bit about this in our previous review, but Sokka is kind of the skeptic of the group. He clearly isn't big on the water bending, even though he's seen it a dozen times, and he doesn't seem very big on the idea of there being an avatar or there being reincarnation or anything like that. And so when Katara brings up the idea that Aang is a reincarnation and these are all of his past lives, Sokka's just kind of no, that's not real, that didn't happen, that's a bunch of hooey or whatever. And but then Aang demonstrates it right in their faces. "Oh yeah, I know exactly who these people are."
And didn't we see Roku's eyes glowing too, which will obviously we see hinted at, or not hinted at later, but we see in another episode what that's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So eventually all the statues' eyes are going to glow. So what ends up happening is Aang does, even though Katara and Sokka were trying to keep it from him, he does end up finding out that, in fact, everybody that he knew and loved did die there at the air temple when he discovers Monk Gyatso's skeleton surrounded by a bunch of Fire Nation helmets. And not just any Fire Nation helmets, but firebender helmets. Whenever you see the face mask that sort of looks like a skull, it's got the two eye holes and everything, those are uniquely worn by firebenders. It's meant to protect their faces from their own blasts.
And the one thing I did notice during this scene is how many Fire Nation helmets were there. Monk Gyatso may have gotten, killed by them, but he took a lot of them out. Once again, a kid show.
Absolutely. G, E for everybody, whatever. But Keith brings up a good point. So one of the things that they'll talk about when it comes to airbending is that it's mostly a defensive martial art or a defensive style of bending. And Aang actually mentions this a couple of times as well, that it's all about evasive maneuvers and being quick on your feet and bouncing around and everything. So it kind of makes me wonder what sort of bending styles did Monk Gyatso know? How did he take out all these people? Because Keith brings up a great point. There were a lot of helmets around him. He definitely did a good job of defending himself. I don't know if he was throwing rocks at these people or if he was throwing them off the mountain or smashing them into walls or what was happening. But he definitely held his ground. He didn't give up without a fight.
Or he just knocked their helmets off. And,
if I'm going out, I'm taking some of you with me.
Yeah, absolutely. But so Aang sees this and he just loses it. He ends up going into, again, what we end up finding out later on, is referred to as the Avatar state. Again, loses complete control, has no power over himself. He's floating in the air. He's creating a massive, ball of air around him. And Keith had brought this up. All of the statues start glowing and everything. And it's basically activating like these references to his past lives. But not only does it activate all of these statues there on the air temple, but it does so at a Fire Nation temple as well. And a couple of fire sages are immediately seeing the eyes glow on their statues and running out of their room and saying, we have to alert the Fire Lord. The Avatar has returned. So this is clearly a big deal. So not only do we have, elderly people within the water tribe that are aware of the Avatar's existence, and not only did we have, obviously very spiritual individuals in these temples within the air temple, but then on top of that, we also have these fire sages that are very in tune to and looking out for signs of the Avatar as well.
And in that scene, the Avatar, like you said, his Avatar spirit comes out, and Katara has to come in and talk him down because he's so upset. And that's when he actually realizes that he is really the last Airbender.
Boy, they should name the show that.
Yeah, it's a good call.
But yeah, so now putting that alongside episode 12, where once again, Sokka's drive to find food leads them to, sort of this little fishing island where, they're shopping for fruit, but they don't have money. So they are on the hunt to try and figure out like how to make some money. And Sokka decides, well, I'm going to get a job. And it turns out that there is a husband and wife fighting over an incoming storm. Put that next to Uncle Iroh. He's talking about, it looks like there's going to be a storm. Zuko, what are you talking about, Uncle? The skies are clear. There's not going to be a storm. We're going north to find the Avatar. Again, that one-track mind. Gotta find the Avatar. But anyway, the fisherman's wife says, I'm not going out in that boat. There's going to be a bad storm. I feel it in my joints. So he says, well, I'll find somebody else to go with me. I'm going to pay him double. Sokka, hearing that, runs over. Oh, I hear you're paying double. Who told you that? But, so he's willing to, risk it all, get some money, hopefully so he can get a meal out of it. In the meantime, Aang is basically confronted again with the idea that he is, in fact, the Avatar, but yes, he did run away. So Keith mentioned this, that he was frozen for 112 years. Well, yeah, that's because he kind of did that to himself. And we end up getting flashbacks later on as Aang explains to Katara after he runs away and after he's yelled at and being told, go ahead and run away again, So
well, remember, the fisherman called him, and I wrote this down, the Avatar who turned his back on the world.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That must have stung.
Yeah, it had to have. Yeah, I can see why he would, get out his glider and take off. Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of weight to put on a kid. And we're going to find out in these flashbacks that it definitely was a lot of weight to put on a kid. So technically, the rules are, I guess, that you're not supposed to tell somebody that they're the Avatar until they're 16, and Aang was only 12. So that's what one monk Gyatso says to Aang. The greatest mistake that the other monks made was telling you that you were the Avatar before you were 16. And, they show Aang a couple of times. He's pretty, distressed, and he's kind of sad. He tries to play a game with his friends. They're talking about the air scooter that we see Aang use quite a bit of times and how they had developed a game with it, but they won't let him play because it's an unfair advantage with him being the Avatar, or at least that's what they think.
Yeah, when they find out that they want to separate him from Gyatso, and that's really what gets him. I mean, I think, their intention was good. He's the Avatar, he's got to start training and all that stuff, but that's not who Aang is. Aang is such a carefree spirit, and, they basically, their actions had him run away as a 12-year-old, as any 12-year-old would do, facing those things, and brought about this 100-year war with no Avatar to stop it, and the Fire Nation basically take control. And I was watching that thinking, man, just a simple decision to try to take him away, who he looked at as a father figure, kind of caused all of this heartache and all this heartache and hardship for everybody in this world.
And another thing I like to notice that, how we said it bounces back and forth between Aang and Zuko, is that to show the duality between Aang and Zuko, there is a moment on Zuko's ship where he's talking about, and nothing is more important, no crew member is more important than finding the Avatar. And then he is challenged, well, they just kind of start fighting, I should say, him and his crew member on the ship. And then, later, Iroh goes down and explains why he is this way, and his crew understands. So it's not, obviously Zuko doesn't think he's a bad guy. He's not out to do anything bad, So it's a duality story where they're both, if you look at it from their angle, they're doing the right thing.
Well, and look at it. I mean, Iroh is the true captain of that ship. He knows how to get people to work, and he knows how to push the right buttons, and he knows that, hey, he's going to have a mutiny on his hands, with what, Zuko was saying. If he doesn't go down and straighten him out, and he just puts it all on the line and says, look, let's think about what that kid went through, and all that happened to him, and who did it to him. Let's be patient with him, basically. And I was like, man, that was so well written, and so, I was like right up next to my screen, like, oh my God, I want to see what's going next.
So did you notice how much respect they all had for him too when he walked, down where they were like sitting around the fire and eating and everything? General Iroh. So, it makes me wonder. So what happened in his past? What more do we not know about General Iroh that everybody would have such reverence for him that they immediately, not only will stop what they're doing, but they'll listen to what he has to say, and it will actually sway their opinion on how they think about Zuko right now. Because, he did, in fact, go against what his uncle suggested. They did sail into the storm, against what was suggested in order to try and find the Avatar. And again, as we find out from, what Iroh is explaining, this is all because this is the only way that his father told him that he could come back home. After being challenged, because we had brought this up before, he wants to go into the War Council room. He thinks, I'm going to be the next Fire Lord eventually. I mean, assuming that his dad dies at some point. I'm going to be the next Fire Lord eventually, and so I need to know what goes on in these War Council rooms so I can be a better leader. So that's all Zuko wants. He just wants to do good by his country. He wants to do right by his countrymen. And that's like the most important thing to him. So they finally let him in. And as soon as he finds out their, horrible mustache twirling villain plan of, we're going to sacrifice all these soldiers, he speaks out like any, sane person would. You can't do that to these men. They love this country and they would do anything, to fight for it. How could you just willingly and knowingly sacrifice them? And he didn't realize that when he spoke out at that point in time, that he wasn't insulting the general or the admiral who had brought up that idea. He was technically insulting his own father.
It was kind of like a Wonder Woman moment. Wonder Woman did that in the Wonder Woman movie, against the British who were going to sacrifice their troops. So it's a hero moment.
And I mean, it's definitely, showing what a fascist state the Fire Lord is running. I mean, to speak out against any of those plans is an insult and is going to get you banned Zuko was right. I mean, the last thing you want to do is just throw people to their deaths when they had numbers and everything else. There was better plans they could have put forward in that during that time of the war, and they just chose to sacrifice people. And man, I was happy that Zuko spoke up. Maybe he was in ignorance, but it was definitely the right thing.
So what I've read about when they were coming up with, the different nations and everything is that the Fire Nation itself was based a lot on Imperial Japan, and that's why it's a very honor-focused society and why they bring it up a lot. It's not just Zuko. It's very important to many other, citizens of the Fire Nation. So it's that's why they settle a lot of these things with these duels. It isn't just something that, Zuko was going to do with Zhao. It was something that he was going to do with another, admiral or captain or general or whatever, until he found out that it was his own father that he was going to have to face. And you can kind of see what a crowd that drew. So not only did he, go to his knees and lose face in front of his own father and then get burned, but in front of how many, other nobility of the Fire Nation. So everybody knows him now as the banished prince, which that's got to suck. So it looked like he used to have hair. I don't know if he shaved that off or if that got burnt off or what happened there, but that's where he got his scar from now. We find out his own father gave that to him, which, God, wow, okay. Get burnt by your father, then get banished and told that you have to go on basically what the Fire Nation considered at that time, a fool's mission to go and find the Avatar.
And the thing is, I mean, to Zuko's credit, instead of being like, oh, this is terrible, and he's like full on to this mission. Okay, I'm finding the Avatar. I know this is what I got to do, and I'm going to put every iota of my effort into it, and I'm going to succeed. And, we talked about it in the first episode where we talked about episode 1 and 2 that, he's not pure evil. No good villain in any show is ever pure evil. And they're definitely showing, that side of him and why he's, pursuing the Avatar to such great lengths.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I don't know if you guys noticed this or not, but if you noticed in the crowd, as Zuko was getting ready to duel his father, did you notice Iroh in the crowd there? So he was standing there, and as soon as the blast of fire came from the Fire Lord, Uncle Iroh turned his face. He couldn't even look at him. Just another point to show that, how much of like a father figure he is to Zuko. And going with the duality that Dave was talking about before, we've got Monk Gyatso, who just wants to protect Aang from being separated from him. And in fact, we're going to end up finding out that he was actually going to run away with Aang the entire time. He wasn't actually planning on letting them take Aang away, but Aang ran away before he found out what the plan was.
Yeah, he runs away and Zuko is pushed away. So, there's a lot of parallels and differences in how they were raised and why they are the way they are.
And Aang actually freezes himself in the ice with his actions during that storm. So and then he just remembers that, and then he remembers waking up with Katara and Sokka.
Yeah, it's funny that he almost did that again when he was going to save Sokka and they were almost overtaken by a wave. He goes into the Avatar state again. You see the water kind of forming around him, and for a second, he almost freezes himself again. But I think something must have taken over, and he's like, no, I can't let this, this thing take over me. I need to regain control, and I've got to save my friends. I can't run away again.
And I think it was him, because he's been working on his water bending. That's what helped him stop it before it froze him again. He was able to control it a little bit because he's practiced with water bending.
Yeah. So all in all, I'd say that this was outstanding. I absolutely loved just how they framed both of these characters' stories. I love how similar they are. I love how, I guarantee if they ever met up, I really think that they actually have a lot more in common than either of them realize. And, I think it's really cool how close both of their stories are, how they've got so much, riding on their individual missions. With Aang, he's got the weight of being the Avatar on his shoulders, and he has to, try and save the world. And Zuko, the only way that he can regain honor and be welcomed back home, or so he thinks, is to find the Avatar and bring him back to the Fire Nation.
Yeah, I think you're right, Doug. I think if, the nations weren't at war, Zuko and Aang would probably get along pretty well because they're very similar.
And speaking from a writing standpoint, that just the more background you can do on any character is going to make any story more enjoyable. And I'm glad that they're taking the time to show not just like the depth of each character, but the parallels between them.
I love how it also ends with basically, as the storm is beginning to secede, and as they're, moving into the eye of the storm, Zuko and his crew. He's trying to save his crew members because, again, like we were talking about, he really does truly care about his fellow Fire Nation soldiers. And even though he doesn't always get along with everybody on his ship, they mean a lot more to him. And he does realize, you know what? I've got to put aside my mission, the thing that is the most important thing to him, and I've got to save my ship and I've got to save my people because, you know, we've got to have each other's backs for sure. And so he ends up pulling somebody up who's getting ready to fall. And I think they all kind of gain a newfound respect for one another.
And I think, you know, as I saw that, I think, you know, his uncle always saw that in him and knew he was that way. And that's why he's with him. And that's why he knows that Zuko would probably be a much better Fire Lord than his father. And he's making sure that if he ever gets it, I haven't seen the end of this series yet, but if he ever does, he will be much better, not only because of who he is, but because of his uncle mentoring him throughout this.
Yeah, you could be very much right. You know, that could be, his ultimate goal is to try and make sure that Zuko is better than his own father because Iroh has a lot of those, sort of morals going along with him too. Very calm, very level-headed, and definitely respects life as well.
Leading by example rather than as like just dictating orders. He's really my favorite firebender character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love how at the end of this episode, you see Aang, flying away in Appa. You can tell he sees Zuko. He's looking down from Appa and sees him, and Zuko looks up and he sees him. But they know that they're not going to go after one another. You know, save it for another day.
Yeah, I was gonna say their story's not over, but we'll take a pause here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what you guys think of these two episodes? Should we rate them together or rate them separate?
Let's rate them together. Overall, as a package deal, I really like the depth of the story and the depth of the characters. I think I would give it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, both episodes really go into a lot of the story behind what makes the characters who they are and also brings their story forward a lot. I mean, Aang with seeing his, monk Gyatso, who was his father, slain in that air temple. He's been so happy and giddy, and it's kind of changing him, and he's realizing, okay, this burden is on me. I need to do what I need to do to make sure things are right. And the same with Zuko. When you find out, I mean, what a terrible way to be, standing up for your fellow man and being exiled from your homeland and being burned and scarred by your father. I mean, they've just done a great job on this, entire series of thinking it all the way through before they start writing, the first episode. And it really shows. I mean, the writing's great. I love all the characters. They're so well done. Great backstories, moving forward at a great rate. I'm probably going to go like a 9.2 out of 10 for these two episodes. I loved them. I'm really completely entranced with this series.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, with both of you, really. Great episodes. I absolutely love the fact that they really took some time to go in depth into these characters. I absolutely love the idea of, doing these flashbacks and getting a chance to see what Aang was like when he first found out that he was the Avatar. I think it was kind of interesting, the method in which they went about it, where, because he happened to choose toys that previous avatars had played with it, that must mean that he recognized them. I feel like maybe they should come up with a slightly better test, but what works, works, I guess. But yeah, I absolutely love how they compare, both Zuko and Aang, where they both have their missions and both have this huge weight on their shoulders. They were both basically driven away from their homes. Aang felt he had to run away, otherwise he would be separated from his father figure. Zuko being banished by his own father. I mean, it's crazy how similar the two are. And I can't wait to see more interactions between the two of them as we take more dives into all of these episodes. So let us know what you guys think. Tell us in the comments below. Was there any other things that you noticed in the episodes that maybe that we missed? Anything else that you want us to talk about? Leave it in the comments below. And we'll see you for the next round.